why. I just had like a bad feeling, or you can call it a premonition.
Do you have a tornado on the ground?
This is a tornado. Yeah, this is a very dangerous situation.
And I opened the back door, and it looked black.
I started calling my wife to tell her I was going to die, and I loved her.
It was just mass destruction to the point where nothing was recognizable.
It looked like the end of the world.
With us are two guests today. First, Kara Dixon, who is the Director of Advancement, Marketing, and Communication, and then Alex Gandy, who is the Director of Career Services. Thank you so much for being with us today. Kara, could you share a little bit about your position here at Missouri Southern?
Sure. So I mainly work with the advancement team. So that really encompasses the Missouri Southern Foundation, who is our nonprofit organization that supports the university in fundraising efforts, and I support our alumni division and also development, who are really the boots on the ground that help with fundraising.
And Alex.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on, first of all.
Thank you.
So I'm the Director of Career Services. So think of helping students prepare not just for their careers, but for just those professional skills that they have, right? And so hosting a wide variety of workshops, hosting career events like recruiting fairs or expos, and professional development opportunities.
Excellent. So I appreciate both of you taking time today. Specifically, what we're looking at is really how your stories intersected during the tornado. And so first, I want to start a little bit before the tornado happened. Kara, what was an average day, just even the day of, or a little bit before the tornado? What was your life like right then?
Sure. My husband and I were recently married, so all of the just everyday mundane tasks. On Sunday, usually it's getting laundry done. At that point in time, my husband was still a server at Ruby Tuesday, and so he was actually at work that day. So it was just a normal day, like any other day.
Alex.
Yeah, so that was a season of life. Again, my wife and I were also newly married. May 22nd was our 1-year anniversary that day, and so like the day of, wow, we were just celebrating our anniversary. But both of us were kind of early career professionals. My wife was a women's minister at a campus ministry connected to Missouri Southern called Koinonia. And I was working at a local marketing firm as a project manager. And so we were just kind of relaxing on a Sunday.
What was that moment where you decided like things are starting to change? What was you started to head to Ruby Tuesday. What was that like?
Sure. So my birthday was actually the day before, on May 21st. So Ruby Tuesday, they gave their customers a free hamburger for their birthday. So I was actually headed to Ruby Tuesday to get my free dinner and go, sit at my husband's table and have him serve me dinner that day. The sirens went off about halfway through my drive to Ruby Tuesday. So I had a decision to make whether I was going to go and turn back to our apartment at the time or continue going to Ruby Tuesday. I decided I didn't know where the tornado was, so I decided I would continue on to Ruby Tuesday.
And then Alex, you were at home.
Yeah, so kind of as I mentioned, so it's my wife and I's 1-year anniversary, right? Like newlywed bliss, like we're just like relaxing, enjoying a Sunday afternoon. We had gone to church earlier in the morning. And I do remember it was like a cloudy day, but we had a duplex at the time, and we were literally watching Parks and Recreation on this thing called a DVR back in 2011 when everybody had a DVR. So we were just trying to just relax. We were getting ready to kind of prepare a really nice anniversary dinner at home, steaks on the grill, and that did not happen.
So at what point did you realize things are going to be like serious and you need to start taking shelter?
I was a guy who was born and raised in St. Louis who I heard a lot of tornado sirens, and we went down to the basement, but our family would just like play games and nothing ever happened. And so I had started hearing some tornado sirens. I can't remember if it was around 4:30, 4:45, and we had a back door that would look out to the west. And I looked out, and it was gray. but I didn't really see any wind. It wasn't raining that much. But it was a rapid change from around 4:30 to about 5 o'clock. And all of a sudden, our duplex had some pretty big windows on the west side, and I was hearing like some pretty significant wind, but really bad, like things like objects hitting the windows. And my wife and I were sitting on the couch. I pop off the couch and I open the back door, and it looked black. And I immediately slammed the door, and I was like, hey, we got to take shelter right away. So we kind of got caught off guard, if I were to be honest with you. We were at home, but it was in the matter of about 15 minutes where we realized, like, this is not what we thought it was.
And you're in a duplex. What kind of shelter options did you have?
The shelter option we had was a half bathroom underneath our stairwell. And it was just a tiny, think of like a bathroom the size of a very small closet that was snuck under a stairwell in a duplex.
All right. So you both knew each other for how many years have you known each other even before that point?
Wow. So probably Beth she got to Joplin 2009. Because she was a women's minister about a year before, like a year before. So I think she lived with you from like 2009 to 2010.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Yeah. So like 16, 17 years.
Gotcha. Okay. So you have this history together, and you have kind of separate things going on simultaneously during this time. Celebrating a birthday, celebrating anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
But things are totally changing rapidly.
Yeah.
Can you share more about what happened at Ruby Tuesday? What was that like there?
Yeah, so I was sitting, I came up on 32nd Street at the intersection of 32nd and Range Line, and I was stopped at the stoplight waiting for it to turn green. I looked to my right, and at that point, the tornado was crossing 20th and Range Line, and it was absolutely massive. I just remember being terrified as I looked up on this monster. There were people that were actually driving towards the tornado, and I think because it was so rain-wrapped and just massive, it was really hard to recognize that this, in fact, was a tornado. So sitting at the stoplight, I told myself I'm going to count down to 10 because I had no idea what direction the tornado was actually going. For all I knew, it was going to come towards me. So I just made the decision, I'm going to count down from 10, and if I get to 0, I'm going to leave the car and I'm going to run on foot to Ruby Tuesday. Now, thankfully, I only got to like 4, and the light changed, and I was able to safely turn and actually get into Ruby Tuesday and go into the freezer, was where all the employees and customers were sheltering. So I was able to get to my husband and safely shelter at that time.
All right. And how long were you in that shelter until you felt like you were able to get out?
Gosh, I feel like time warps in that. So I'm actually not sure how long we were actually in there. It felt like a really long time. Right. I have no idea. It felt like a really long time until we kind of got the all clear and we were able to leave and go home.
Okay. Alex, what was your time sheltering like?
So, I mean, it happened in the blink of an eye, Brian. Like I slammed the back door to our duplex. I grabbed my wife, who's just barefoot at the time, just like we were just loungewear hanging out, and we ran into our half bathroom, and I closed that door, and I think it was within probably 10 to 15 seconds. Like she had hunkered down on the floor beside the toilet, and I was kind of bear hugging her over the top of her, and immediately the door blew open, and it felt like like the sound of it was almost like a train was driving right through our duplex. But also think of the highest winds so like it just was deafening. But it also happened really, really fast. Like it didn't feel like we were sitting in chaos forever. But it happened so fast, and it was incredibly loud. But the aftermath of that, like we didn't know if we could get up. We didn't know the stability of the walls around us. And what was providential was, so this bathroom also had an exterior wall. So we would have been caved in, but a hole was driven through the exterior wall so that there was I don't know how big it was, but even some of the bricks had been blown through so we could even get out of where we were, because essentially we would have been caved in without that.
It's incredible.
It is incredible. Wow. We were incredibly lucky, very blessed.
So you made it home, Kara, and Now, at what point do you think like we need to start checking on people, and specifically, like,
Yeah.
you check with Alex, or well, I don't know if you have any kind of communication going on. I'm guessing the phones are not working at all.
No,
right?
no cell phone service at all. So we were unable to get a hold of anybody. So we weren't able to contact our parents and our family who live out of town to let them know that we were safe. By that time, all we could do was turn on the radio and try to figure out what had happened. And we kind of knew that the tornado had gone right by Alex and Beth. So as soon as we got home, we made the decision like, hey, we're going to change into our running clothes and we're going to drive as far as we can towards where Alex and Beth, where they lived, and that's what we did. We got as close as we could until we couldn't go any further. We parked the car and then we literally just took off on foot running towards our friends.
Yeah. And I know during that time, there were no like signs or anything. Was it hard to even figure out like where their duplex was at the time, or finding kind of navigating
There
some
was
of
a
that?
point, it was just mass destruction to the point where nothing was recognizable. I remember actually, like, there were people wrapped in blankets with like blood dripping down their face, like just pure shock as people were emerging from what used to be their homes. I just started bawling while running, which is not a good combination. So Dustin was actually quite a bit in front of me because nothing was recognizable. Any landmark, trees, everything was gone.
So Alex, you and Beth are just kind of assessing your situation.
Yeah.
You're able to get out of the house.
Yeah.
Where do you go
So through like in that bathroom, like every traditional bathroom, there was a mirror, and so in the attempt to get out of the bathroom, of course, like I had grabbed some basic supplies like my wallet, my phone, and then just ran into the bathroom. But I just grabbed my wife, and she didn't have anything, so she cut her foot on the way trying to get out of the bathroom and out of the debris. And we lived in like a cul-de-sac of other duplexes, and there was just debris everywhere. And so just assessing our situation, I remembered, like it was cold, like it was May, right? It had been like a cloudy day, but we were relatively cold. I remember reaching into this Toyota Camry that I had at the time, and I remember I had a soft shell, a jacket that for some reason I had left in there. I shook out all the glass from it and I put that on, and then I put my wife on my shoulders, on my back as a piggyback ride because she couldn't walk amongst the debris. And we didn't really know what to do. As we assessed and looked at our house, like, well, we shouldn't stay here, because there was, thankfully, a great advocate was going around our houses shutting off gas valves.
Oh yeah.
Because we all had natural gas heat, and he was shutting, and he knew what to do, and I'm like, I don't know what to do with that. But we said, you know what? We lived at the corner of 20th and Connecticut, is where we were within the community, and we're like, let's just start trying to walk towards the main road, and see what happens. And by I'm trying not to cry. We got barely out of our cul-de-sac onto 20th Street, and we ran into the Dixons running towards us.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what was that when you first saw Alex and Beth and saw that they were at least, making their way out? What was that first moment like when you saw?
Oof, I'm gonna get choked up too.
Yeah.
We're just so thankful that they were okay. When you look at that kind of destruction, it's hard to think of what could have been.
For sure.
And to just feel an overwhelming sense of just relief that our friends were okay, and just gratitude that God kept them safe, especially on their anniversary, and just making sure that we just took them home with us and making sure that they were okay.
Yeah. So the first priority was making sure that you got some medical care for Beth, I think, right? And so what did that look like?
Well, we as soon as we ran into the Dixons, just being reminded that there's help out there, they had this good idea. They quickly were kind of just understanding, because we hadn't heard anything on the radio, and that was your old, was that Tanner, right? Like your Chevy Malibu?
Yeah.
Yeah, man, love that car. So it rescued us, but we got in, and they had been listening to radio reports, and we had heard that St. John's had been hit really, really bad. and that those patients were being taken to Freeman, or some type of emergency triage was happening amongst those two medical facilities. And so Dustin or Kara, I can't remember, thought that they remembered McEwen Brooks at the time, which is now Mercy Carthage.
Yeah.
And they're like, let's drive there. There's probably not going to be a lot of people there. And so that's where we headed.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a debate because obviously that was a lot farther distance away, but ultimately we had decided like, hey, everyone from St. John's is probably going to be going to Freeman. And so, we headed towards Carthage.
And was navigating there challenging, or was there much traffic at that point?
Once we got, so like I think you guys had made it to roughly like 15th in Connecticut is where I want to say we found your car as we
We parked
piggybacked.
at Gabby's
That's
apartment.
right.
Yeah.
I remember that. Yeah. Like right along Connecticut.
Yep.
And so once we kind of, because I can't remember the width of the tornado, but navigating around like 4th and 7th Street in Connecticut was challenging.
Yeah.
But as we kind of headed north,
Away
from the tornado, it was eased up. And once we got on the highway, once we got on 249, it was smooth sailing, and really incredibly thankful for the team that was at McEwen Brooks and Mercy. Like they were ready. Like they had set up a triage center, just because like it was this, we were in shock. Like I was feeling just completely numb and like just not understanding what had just happened. My wife was sobbing because she was also like, we had just lost everything, and she was in an incredible amount of pain because she had cut her foot really bad on a piece of mirror. And so they received us really quick. We got right in. Like I think she was one of the first triage patients because they were still setting stuff up, and she was able to get her foot stitched up.
I remember staff literally running every which way in the hospital, getting triage set up and getting ready to receive a lot more people. So I remember them literally running through the hospital, getting everything set up, ready to receive people.
So you've got medical care for Beth, and was anybody else hurt in that process, or you were all right, Alex?
Thankfully, no. Yeah.
So Beth's taken care of. What was kind of like your next move, like partially emotionally, like now that you've gotten a chance to kind of like think of like what our next move is, how did that kind of play out? I was like, what do we do now?
Well, I mean, to give props to the Dixons, they're like, well, you're coming home with us. Clearly you guys don't have a home anymore. And they were just incredibly hospitable. Like that's just one of their gifts. That's one of their characteristics and values that they just exude to everyone that they meet, is like their house is your house. And so they took us back to their apartment, right? It's not like they had a big space. They had a 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment in Joplin. And so they made their guest room our room. It was hard getting a hold of our parents. Getting a hold of our parents within those first 2 to 4 hours was really tricky. But then it was just trying to assess and figure out, okay, what do we do? Thankfully, we were connected to a really communal church that we started gathering like every night at the church to kind of swap stories, swap resources, figure out how we can collectively help each other. And that's kind of how we slowly got back up on our feet. But the Gandys couldn't have done it without the Dixons.
So, Kara, what was the point where you're like, we need to make sure the Gandys are coming home with us? And what did you even talk to your husband, or who even kind of initiated that?
I don't think there was ever a question. Like we both just knew, like, of course they're going to come home with us. At one point, you guys were able to get through to family. Yeah. So Beth had 2 brothers that actually came in and camped out on our living room floor that night. Yep. Because of course they were coming in and wanting to make sure that everyone was okay, and helping, in the days after that, trying to figure out what we could salvage from their home. So yeah, but I don't think my husband and I ever actually discussed it. We're just like, well, of course they're coming home with us. So.
Yeah, I remember that even in the days after, we would be making trips to and from like Kara and Dustin's apartment to our home, and then to our church. And like just we had stuff everywhere, and it was just like every day was like a day of discovery of maybe what was damaged and what was lost versus what was found. And just incredibly thankful for the help that we had from the Dixons, or from, because we thought at first like maybe we were gonna go to Springfield because that's where my in-laws were, but my wife and I wanted to stay. We didn't want to leave the place where our friends were, where our resources were, and where our direct support was.
I remember, Alex, you and Dustin would go pick up stuff and bring it back, And I remember sitting out on our little concrete patio with trash bags full of clothes, and I would pull out garments to see, okay, what can be saved that's worth washing. And I remember pulling one of Beth's shirts out thinking, oh great, this one made it. And as I pulled it out, there was just like a perfect hole right through the middle of the shirt. So just trying to almost kind of shield Beth too, of okay, that one didn't make it, but just going through and sorting through the things for her so she didn't have to see what didn't make it. And then of course I think of our poor washer and dryer. Got a good workout after that.
All the insulation, and that was what was wild about after they had all the debris cleanup, was just that there was wet insulation attached to everything. Wow. And just trying to decide what to or to not clean, or what try to or not to clean up was a challenge.
Were you able to get back to your space pretty quickly, or did you feel like it was a while before you were able to access it?
We were able to get back. I remember even late that night. So we had heard, after we had gotten settled at the Dixons, and both my brothers-in-law showed up, and it was just Dustin, and their names are Tim and Dan, and myself were talking in the family room. My wife had already gone to sleep. It was such a traumatic event. She was exhausted. And we had heard reports on the radio of looting. And we were just thinking, what are things at my house that I would be really bummed if I didn't try and go back. So I remember we got our headlamps on, we got flashlights, and it was challenging because there were police monitoring the situations as best they could. We had, thankfully, first responders from all over the 4 states came to help. And I remember I had to show, thankfully I still have my driver's license, which had my address on it. I had to show multiple police my driver's license. This is where I live. I know you can't really see that street anymore, but that's where I need to go. And I remember trying to cross multiple blockades, but I'm thankful for that security, because otherwise maybe we would have had more things looted.
Yeah. So you're able to navigate getting some stuff back, but also navigating some of the emotional just processing of that. Kara, can you just share a little bit of whatever memories or images that are burned into your memory from that event that you kind of hold on to, either in a challenging way or a way that you feel like it's kind of transformed you?
Yeah, we went to a church called Mystery at that time, and it was the first place that I had ever really experienced what a true gospel community was like. Because it wasn't just the Gandys who were affected in our church. We had multiple families that were affected, and so pulling together as a church and going and sorting through the rubble. I'll never forget, we were cleaning up. I'm not even sure whose house it was, but we were cleaning up, and there were nurses walking the streets giving everyone tetanus shots. Wow. I didn't ask for ID. I didn't question the needle that they were going to stick in my arm. But they were volunteers going out and just making sure that people were safe while they were helping clean up the rubble. So I rolled up a sleeve and got a tetanus shot, in the middle of cleaning up rubble. But it was astounding to see the community pull together in a way that, amidst such tragedy, Joplin came together as a true community, helping each other, and I think especially as our church, just sharing what we had with those who didn't have anymore. So
that's awesome. And I feel like so many stories revolve around how community showed up and how important that has been to so many stories. Alex, can you share an image or memory from your experience? I remember one of the images I do vividly remember was, it was a wildly beautiful sunset that night after the tornado. And I remember, our duplex was 2-story, and I remember climbing up to where our bedroom would have been. And Beth was down on the ground. And we had stored her wedding dress underneath our bed. In this preservation box, and that was the biggest thing that she was concerned about. And that is a memory that I'll never forget. It was my wife lost her wedding dress. But the opposite of that, I remember in the days following, I have a 1965 Ford Falcon hot rod, and so
the garage was like the main, like the thickest wall in that place, or in the duplex. And so that was the one wall that kind of stood and everything else fell on top of it. But digging out and finding the keys to that, it was like 3 hours of like, I knew where I had this like little key hook holder, and I'm just gonna start where my front door was, and just started with 4 to 5 feet high of debris and started just going layer by layer like an archaeologist and finding that. Found our MacBook, which ironically we took to an Apple store and it worked. After they did some they took it apart and dried everything out, which was amazing.
As I recall, you were also brewing beer at the time.
I was yeah, I was an amateur beer brewer, and I actually had a wheat beer that was ready to be bottled. And I remember there was a bunch of gals around. We found it in the tub on the second floor in a bucket, and we're like, well, what are we gonna do with this? And so we all took drinks of it, like kind of in a celebratory fashion. It was like the best beer I've ever had. So yeah, there's different things. I think going back and seeing even that street now, and just how things have transformed, and just being reminded of like the gratitude that we're still here is good. We still have some key mementos and items and objects. Like I still have that soft shell that I put on immediately after the tornado, and I'll never get rid of that, right? It's pretty ratted and torn up now, but I'll never get rid of it. You know, I still have my hot rod, things like that. But the most important thing is that we have, my wife and I have each other. We have friendships like the Dixons that really solidified those friendships, and being reminded that we're all in this together, right? Especially in a community like Joplin, right? That it's a small town, that we are here to help each other. We don't want to be combative and competitive, but we want to be communal and supportive, and that's what the tornado provided for us.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for sharing your stories with us. And I think community is such a common theme throughout that, and the importance of people in our lives that are able to step out and reach out to really challenging times in our lives, and how important that is. So thank you both for your time and your stories. With us now is Dr. Stephanie Goad, and she is the Senior Coordinator of International Admissions and Recruitment. Stephanie, thank you so much for taking some time to speak with us today.
Absolutely.
Could you just start out sharing what your position is here at Missouri Southern, what you do with us?
Okay, currently I'm the Senior Coordinator of International Admissions and Recruitment, so I'm responsible for recruiting international students and also oversee their advisement pretty much from the time they apply to the time they graduate or otherwise leave the university.
And I know you've been in international recruitment for a while now.
Yes, a long time.
But even back in 2011.
Yes.
So can you tell me, what was your position the time around the tornado?
During the time of the tornado, I was more the International Student Advisor and Exchange Program Coordinator. So I was responsible for more advising the students, didn't do quite as much on the recruitment side. But once the students were here, I took care of them. They were my extended family, so you know, they're far away from home, and so my job was to take care of them once they were here. And then I also sent students abroad, so I worked the exchange programs as well.
Imagine you have kind of a vested interest in each of the students'
Yes.
well-being,
Yes.
whether they're abroad or whether you're
Yes,
they're
they were
here
like
with
my
us.
children.
Yeah, and I imagine when the tornado came through and you knew there was kind of an imminent threat, even though it was at the end of the semester and many of them had left, you still have this kind of sense of, I need to take care of my students.
Yes.
And so we'll definitely talk about
Okay.
that. But take me back to the day of the storm. Where were you at? How did you decide, I think this is going to be a thing that's maybe bigger than the normal storms we've had in the past, that you decided you need to go shelter?
Yes, so it was a normal day, normal Sunday for us. You know, we go to church, we usually had the family over. I had made a pot roast, I vividly remember that, because despite losing our home during the tornado, that pot roast made it. It had a few extra ingredients. So yeah, the crock pot was filled with other things. But I vividly remember the family coming over. You know, we just kind of it was more of a chill afternoon. We just, visited, ate lunch, and then everybody went home. So I thought I would lay down and take a nap and then go tan afterward around the corner. We lived around the corner from Action Video, which was a video store that also had some tanning beds. And so that was my plan. The sun was shining, the sky was blue. And then shortly after I woke up, the tornado siren went off. And so it went off, and I called my mother because she lived around the corner. And I just told her, the sirens are going off. I don't know, it doesn't look bad out here, but if you want to come over, you might want to go ahead and do that. So she did, she came over, but the sirens had stopped meanwhile. And so we thought, well, they've called it off. And then pretty soon the sky darkened, and it just seemed like, inclement weather was approaching. And so my husband turned on the news, and they were, of course, forecasting, bad weather. And then I remember going down, normally we wouldn't have taken shelter. We just kind of, we've had the sirens go off before. Sure. So we sort of didn't really take it seriously a lot of times. So I would have normally been up in the upstairs living room just working on my laptop until it passed. For some reason, we went ahead and went on down to, it's a partial basement. We had a family room and a bathroom that sort of served as a laundry room as well, more of a utility room. And so we went downstairs, and the power, I remember, flickered and kind of went off and back on. So I thought I would go ahead and just light some emergency candles and a kerosene lamp just in case we lost power altogether. And then shortly we did lose power. I went ahead and took the lamp. I just had to go use the bathroom, and so I went into the utility room and took the lamp with me, left some candles burning, and then pretty soon things started hitting, just pelting the side of the house, just broadside, like bigger items, not just like hail. And so my husband let me know that we're going to have to take cover. And so I grabbed a quilt, and my mother and my husband and I, we sought shelter in that utility room. I just grabbed a quilt to put over us, and so we got under it. We shut the door. We had a big husky, I remember. He dove in. He knew something was coming. He dove in between the wall and me, and we had a little small dog that had taken off and went upstairs, and my husband started to go after him, and I just told him, it's too late, it's here, you're just going to have to let him go. And so we hated that, of course. We did find him later, just spoiler alert here, but at the time, we had to take cover, and when it started really pelting the house, we knew this was bigger than just the average storm. I had no idea, though, the magnitude or what was to come. I remember hearing the tornado tear into the house, and I think that was just a stark realization of, our own mortality and how, the thought crosses your mind, this could be it, and I actually thought for a moment that, my boys may have to bury their parents and their grandma. We were all, our hands were stacked on top of each other, all three of us, and we were all praying out loud, our own prayer, I don't know what they were saying because I was praying my own, but just you're praying for protection, of course, and protection over my boys, but then you also still realize that this could be it, And I remember getting sort of a glimpse of my dad, who'd passed away about a year and a half before the tornado. Just my mind went to him, and then I stopped shaking. I calmed. It was just like a peaceful calm that settled over me. And I just had a feeling that it's going to be okay. Either way, you know, I'm either going to live to tell about this or I will join my dad. And then I switched then. I made the shift from praying for protection to just praying that if survival was not in the plan, that we would be taken quickly, that we would not have to suffer, you know, anything. So, but finally, we thought it was over. There was a period of calmness. You could no longer hear the storm. But then just very little time passed. My husband couldn't get the door open because the whole, it's like, I don't know if the foundation or just the structure had shifted, so we couldn't quite get the door open. And but then the backside of the tornado tore through, and so it wasn't over. We thought it was. So we learned later that we went through the eye of the tornado. Because that calm space is the eye. Mm-hmm. And I learned a lot about tornadoes after that. But so that's kind of what happened during the storm. Once it was over and it was clear that we had gone through it, my husband was able to get us out. I did not have any shoes on my feet. So I was not able to walk out of there until he found something, because the stairwell was covered with every shard of material you could imagine. I mean, metal, splinters of wood, glass, everything. And so he had to search, but he found where our front door, you know, off of our porch used to be. So he was able to retrieve a pair of my muck boots that I used in the garden, and so I was able to walk up out of there. The shock is indescribable, though, because coming up out of the basement, I remember looking up and just, I had this mouth agape look of shock. I mean, it had to have been, if anybody saw me. I panned, and as far as my eye could see, I could see nothing standing. You know, I could see the inside of people's homes. You know, their kitchens were exposed, people yelling for help. It looked like the end of the world. And I was so discombobulated and just shaken, just at the sheer sight of it, that I threw up in the bushes. I mean, I know this is probably too much information, but that is how upsetting that sight was for me.
And now, how did you get kind of from your house to at least some kind of place of stability? Did you start, were you able to contact anybody, or what was your next move from there?
So, just thinking back, it was about an hour and a half. We were able to get a text out to my oldest son. We were pretty sure that he was okay. He worked at Best Buy at the time, and that was not, at least as far as we knew, in the path of the storm. I did worry, however, about our youngest, because he was, I think he was 17 at the time. He worked out at Twin Hills Golf and Country Club, which was west of us. And it was about an hour and a half before we knew if he was even alive, because we could not get texts out after that. I got the first text out and got a response from our oldest, but then we could not get calls through, we could not get texts to go through, even to let my oldest know that we had made it out of the basement. But my other son said that finally, you know, he was able to make it home. I think he had to drive through some yards and things on the way, just because the roads were so strewn with debris. But it hit the edge of the golf course and veered then, so they were safe. And then we could not really get to the shelters, so it was actually easier for, I have a nephew, my sister lived in Monette, which is kind of my old hometown, which isn't that far from Joplin, but my nephew was able to get to the southern edge of Joplin, and we were able to get over there. So he just came and got us and took us there. But it took a lot of driving, trying to get around some debris and things. I lost my truck, so we were in one of my boys' vehicles, and then my husband had a Jeep that was, it needed a lot of cosmetic surgeries following because he refused to total it out. But so it looked like it had been, the back half had been eaten by a shark, but it was still drivable. So we were able to get to my son's friend's house to where that we could be evacuated then.
All right. So you have your family kind of taken care of, you know
Yes.
that they're safe.
Yes.
And I'm sure kind of the next thought is how are your students,
Yes.
or at least making sure, checking in with any students who hadn't
Right.
left the area. And so can you tell me, I know you got some calls from some of the embassies.
Yes.
Tell me some of that process.
So a few days later, when we were able to access it had rained so many, for I think a couple of days after, it just kept raining. So it was difficult to get in and work on any of the recovery efforts. But while we were sifting through some of the debris, just trying to recover some of our belongings, I was getting calls. I received a call, I believe it was from the French embassy first, and then like the Russian embassy, and people checking on their students. And that's when I sort of felt a little helpless. I'd been in touch with the office, and we had a Safe and Well Facebook page kind of set up for the international students. I was pretty confident most of them had either left for the summer or were traveling in other places, but we did have some who lived off campus, and so that was the largest concern for me. So I had to work with people back at the office to try to, get students to check in. They emailed them, ask, we contacted them on Facebook, just trying to get them to just check in, let us know you're okay. And then that way we just kind of tick those off of the list so that we could identify. I did have a couple of students who had lost their apartments. We had some passports to get replaced. Fortunately, we didn't lose any. The one that stands out, though, is we had a Saudi student who had been in the country for about 5 months, very limited English. He had arrived with a few others that arrived about the same time, and so they were all in the English program. And that whole story, that situation actually shaped how we conduct our orientation for international students now. This student was on the 3rd floor of his apartment building, did not know apparently what the sirens meant. And this apartment building was yards from our house. So it was in the area that was hardest hit. He ended up buried under the rubble. He was able to wrangle his cell phone out of his pocket. He was in the bathroom of his, I guess he went into the interiormost room of the house, or the apartment, which was the bathroom. Able to retrieve his phone, and he started texting his friends then, who went looking for him. And when they got to the location, which it was so hard to identify where things were. The signage was gone, all those markers that we used,
Right.
to just have any orientation of where you are, those things were gone. But they made it to where the rescue workers were working on that apartment complex. And this was at 20th and Connecticut. And they told the rescue workers that their friend was buried in there. And they had assured them that no, we've retrieved everybody, we've gotten everybody out that's that's in there. And they said, no, he's texting me, look. And they showed the cell phone, and he had been texting. So they searched and they found him. But like I said, that reshaped how we conducted orientation after that. We do some education now on what that siren means. Where do you go? You know, he should have never been on the 3rd floor. So now we have, you know, storm shelter on campus, a lot more storm shelters, but we want them to know, what does this mean when you hear this, and where do you go?
It's pretty incredible how, like, how much you learn sometimes
Yes.
in the result thing like that.
I firmly believe disasters shape processes.
Absolutely.
I mean, we lost so many schools in the town, and that reshaped, you know, the whole landscape of education here. So,
When kind of looking at, you've lost your home and your family's safe, but I need to focus on kind of how do I rebuild there, but also I need to take care of my students. How did you manage both that emotionally, but also just logistically?
In the past, you know, the one thing that was hard for me, I guess, was, you know, being on the receiving end of some of the services and the rescue efforts. That was difficult for me because normally I was a caregiver. You know, I mean, I would volunteer for the Red Cross and be the ones handing out the water and things. And so it felt really helpless to not be able to provide that. So I was really impressed with Missouri Southern in the fact that they shifted this campus into a community hub. You know, they became a shelter. They became a safe and well location. So they actually, we had staff that stretched beyond their roles as bursar's office, you know, attendants and, you know, administrative assistants to, you know, logging information of people who were reporting in that they were safe. And then they turned the health science building into a triage center. I remember even having to go there to get medicines replaced. I mean, see a doctor so you could get a prescription, because my other prescription, you know, went away. We had just picked it up that day. My husband had just picked up my medicine from Walmart, and it was sitting on the kitchen table. So that went away. So we had to get some medicines replaced and things. So I was just really impressed with how Missouri Southern really stepped in at a time that the community really needed them. You know, they had the, like a temporary morgue that they were operating here too. Just they had, because the campus was untouched physically, you know, they were able to use it to help in the recovery efforts. And that meant a lot to me, just being a lifelong, I call myself a lion lifer.
Yeah.
I feel like that Missouri Southern has been part of my life since I came here as a young freshman at the age of 18. You know, I received some of my degrees from here. And so it's just always been near and dear to me. So to see them step up at a time that this community really needed it, I mean, that really mattered. And what they did really helped with the healing of the community. And it really made me swell with pride to be a part of that. Even though I couldn't always be here at that time, I did come out, though, to work in the shelter a little bit because I just needed that emotional and mental break.
Oh, yeah.
And to feel like that I wasn't just receiving services, you know. I had to sort of give myself permission to receive those things because that was difficult for me. But to feel like that I could help others who went through the same thing, that was gratifying and healing at the same time. And then just to be able to try to get in touch with those students and make sure that they're okay, especially the ones who did suffer some loss. They were not home at the time, which I was grateful that they didn't have to go through that type of trauma, but they did have to get some things replaced. So I did work with them to try to get passports replaced. You know, we had to write some letters and things like that to get them what they needed just so that they can travel home and Some of them, they were finishing their studies here, and so they needed to be able to travel.
Yeah. Can you tell me not only Missouri Southern's local community connection, but since you work with a lot of international students, did you see some outpouring from other countries or international investment in just the relief efforts for Joplin?
Gosh, there were so many volunteers that came from all over. I know people had come from across the country. Internationally, we had a lot of our former international students reach out. Some of them had heard about me losing my house and, others on our campus losing their homes, and they would reach out to make sure we were okay. I received a big banner signed by a bunch of the German students who were here just previously. There was a group that had come on exchange, and just maybe a semester or two before that. And so, that outpouring of support and just letting us know that, they were thinking of us, that meant a lot. And then we had, we are members of ISEP, which is International Student Exchange Program. It's an agency based in Washington, D.C. that facilitates the exchanges between member universities. So we send students abroad, and some of those schools that are members send them here. I had worked with them for a long time, and they sent us, my family and I, a gift card, a significant amount. Wow. On a Target gift card. And those types of things just meant the world to us. I feel like that disaster brings people together at times, and our partner schools, they reached out to us. A lot of them were either concerned about their students or they just had heard, and they wanted to make sure that we were okay.
Has this experience, just looking back even 15 years, how does that change your view of the importance of community, or how a community is resilient through things like a disaster like we had?
I feel like that there's just a connection there, especially if you have resided in the community for a long time. And I feel like that disasters like that just can fortify that connection that you have as a community. And I feel like that Joplin was different than so many places. You saw them helping each other and not waiting for help. I mean, a lot of them would get their chainsaws out and they would start, removing debris, helping their neighbors when they had lost everything themselves. There were emergency workers who had lost their homes, but they were out there. They rushed in to help others when they had their own crisis. And to me, that is what community is about. It's that connection and that just desire to help your fellow community members and just band together to survive and overcome. And I think that's where Joplin is resilient. They weren't just hit by disaster. They overcame disaster. And I feel like a lot of things have changed since that time in the way that we build our homes, in our schools with safety in mind. I feel like that home is just so tied to your identity and your sense of self. Sure. And when you lose those, it's like you've lost a piece of yourself. But with a strong community, I feel that you can overcome that and you can rebuild and be stronger and regain that sense of home and belonging.
Are there any images, memories, conversations that have stuck with you these past 15 years from that event? I
mean, I feel, as far as a feeling, I feel that the tornado really showed us all what was important. It took, I think, 9 minutes for everything, to wipe away everything that we had. So that has reshaped how I live my life now. I don't collect things. I don't worship things. You know what I'm saying? Because those can be gone tomorrow. So I feel like that the relationships and things that we build, and I've had that conversation with other people that kind of felt that same way, that, you know, it's not the things that matter, you know, it's those relationships, those connections you build, and the impact that you can bring to others, that you can have on others. I feel like that it really showed me what's important.
I love that. On a lighter note, you said that your smaller dog that had run off.
Yes.
So when did you end up finding out that she was
So
okay?
it was really interesting. So I told you, we went to my sister's house. I was actually sleeping in her living room floor alongside my boys and my husband. We just had sleeping bags. I got a call about 2 a.m, that same night of the tornado had happened. And the person identified themselves as a rescue worker. And he asked if I had a dog named Harley. It was a tiny little min pin dog, kind of like a Chihuahua look. But I just gasped, and I'm like, oh, did you find him? And he said, yes. So apparently, of course, this dog, he had seizures often. And a lot of times he couldn't like move, or like, you couldn't, if you called him, he wouldn't come.
Oh, yeah.
See, we yelled for him. We yelled for him, and we couldn't. You know, it was before we ever left. We just couldn't find him. We just assumed that he was blown away with the tornado, and he said that he was on the flooring, I guess, of what used to be our house. And he said that he was happy to see them, you know, and he was a fireman, and but off duty, I guess, but he was helping with the rescue efforts, and he took our dog to his house and kept him until that we could meet up, because it would be a few days.
Oh, yeah.
And took him to the vet because I guess something had happened to his paw. And so he was able to enjoy the lap of luxury with him and his family for a few days. But he made it. I couldn't believe it. I mean, this like 4-pound dog, 5-pound dog, you know?
Wow.
So it was quite comical and just astounding at the same time, because he ran up the stairs about the time that the tornado was hitting. And so the only thing we could figure out is maybe he hid under the bed. Maybe he had had a seizure or something and just could not come when we called him.
Wow.
But later, after he recovered, and by the time the rescue workers got there, he was, you know, just moving around on the flooring. So
Incredible.
I'm glad you circled back to that.
No, I was interested. I know it turned out okay, but I just wanted to make.
I did want to start with that when I mentioned it, because I don't want people wondering, you know, what happened to the dog.
Yes.
But so I thought I would provide a little early spoiler alert.
That's good. Yeah. So is there anything else that you wanted to share about your story that I haven't really had a chance to ask you on?
I can't think of anything else, but I think that I would just encourage everyone to just realize that, you know, it is a process. You know, if you have to go through any disaster, it is a process. Allow yourself time to grieve. Allow yourself permission to accept help from people, because it may be difficult if you're not used to that. And, you know, finding yourself homeless, sometimes, you know, it's just a really difficult realization. And I do remember, so I can share one more thing.
Sure.
So I do remember when at Food for Less, they brought in trucks of all sorts of donations, toilet paper, all kinds of supplies, toothpaste, toothbrushes, shampoos, everything. And they had them all aligned in shopping carts. And I remember they just allowed us all to come and just get what you needed. Mm. And that meant everything, you know, and got a box and you start, and I'm just like, oh, we need this, we need that. Oh my goodness, we need this. And then it just hit me, oh my gosh, we're homeless, you know? And I just kind of looked around and just realized they were all, you know, everyone was in the same situation. So I just, okay, well, you know, I just had to kind of give myself permission to accept this help. So I think that would be my advice to anyone, is to, you know, give yourself that permission, because it can be difficult.
Yeah, definitely. When we're used to being able to provide for ourselves,
Yes.
or enjoy being able to do that for other people. But
Yes, it is a huge pride pill to swallow, but you can. And I feel like that it really opens up your heart, and you become, there's just so much gratitude. You know, I can't thank the volunteers enough for what they did to help us all recover. I mean, the whole community, just, it was nice to be able to help with the Habitat for Humanity, 10 homes in 10 days. You know, my dad taught me how to do a lot of carpentry, and also heat and AC, and, you know, shingling houses and things when I was younger. We were the boys he never had. My sisters and I were the boys he never had. And so to be able to go and volunteer in Missouri, Southern was part of that. They sent a team. This is another reason why I am so proud of my employer, and how they handled that situation, is that they supplied a team of people to go and help with this 10 homes in 10 days. And I mean, from the lowest employee all the way up to the top, they all helped. And so just to be able to use some of those skills my dad taught me to help others who have lost so much, that meant everything. And it made me just feel like my dad was, you know, still here helping, that he was here helping with the recovery efforts, you know, through me. But it was just so gratifying to be able to help other people gain another structure so that they could build a home, you know, inside that structure.
that's great. Dr. Goad, thank you so much for taking time to speak with us.
Thank you for having me. I can't believe it's been 15 years.
Incredible.
Yeah.
With us is Nathan Mills, and he is the production editor at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Nathan, thank you so much for your time with us. Could you share a little about your history with Missouri Southern and where you got to where you're at today?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I graduated from Southern with a BA in Mass Communications in 2012. I worked for the Joplin Globe for several years before moving on to the Post-Dispatch. And as we talked a little bit earlier, I would not be where I'm at today without the education I got here in the communications department. We had a really impressive staff passing their lessons on to us. And the work that I got to do on the chart helped me launch my career and really helped me launch my life. So yeah, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to give back a little bit.
I'm excited to talk about some of your time with the chart and how that has connected you with so many opportunities professionally, specifically relating to the tornado and kind of how that has changed your career. So first, to tell me, what was life like? You were a college student, right, before, like around the time of the tornado.
Yeah.
What was like your average day-to-day experience?
I don't know about my average day-to-day at the time, but I mean, I had just finished my junior year. I was about to start my senior year in college. I had been a communications major for a couple of years at that point, and was writing sports and columns in the chart that weren't always super well received, but that was the direction I was headed. In February of that year, I'd gotten engaged, so you know I was headed toward graduation. I was headed toward getting married. Things were on the upswing. You know, things were looking good.
And you were, that night, you were working at a mattress store here in Joplin.
Yeah.
And tell me how things kind of played out. You were closing up the store around the time of the tornado.
Yeah, so it was a Sunday. Obviously, on Sundays we closed at 6, and so about 5:30, I get a phone call from a coworker who was off that day. He's like screaming in my ear. He's like, "There's a tornado! I'm gonna go, chase it, or what?" I said, "Kevin, don't do that." And so I didn't believe him. You know, I mean, there's a lot of times, you know, you hear that, especially here, and we kind of just downplay it. I thought, you know, it's nothing. I had been outside, you know, as I was cleaning up, taking trash out and stuff, and I noticed clouds looked very different. They were like kind of green and like very low, almost like I could touch them. It felt, I mean, it was a very strange experience. So I kind of thought Kevin might be right, you know, and so I went inside and I started closing up. I mean, you know, it was going to storm. We weren't going to have any customers in 15 minutes or so, you know. So about 5:45, I locked the door and started to, you know, put things away. And then a couple of people pulled up to the front of the store. I thought, oh, we got some customers. And so I unlocked the door, and when I tried to push it open out the glass facade of the front of the store, I could see the front edge of the storm come across range line to my south. I could see debris being blown across range line. I could see, you know, the wall of rain on the outside. And when I went to push the glass door open, I couldn't move it. And I mean, you can see me, I'm a big boy. Like if I can't move the door, that's a lot of pressure outside. And so I knew this is bad. I tried to get to shelter, and you know, we were in a, I mean, you see these buildings all over town, right? They're like aluminum siding. There's not much to them. We didn't have a basement. We didn't have a, you know, what was I going to do? So I tried to get in my boss's office and couldn't. So I just jammed myself into the door frame as best I could and waited.
Can you describe those moments as the tornado came through?
Yeah.
Do you remember what was that? What did it sound like?
You know, there wasn't train is what you hear a lot, right? I didn't get that. It was just loud. You know, I mean, if you've ever, you know, we're sitting here in the studio, right, with the microphones and stuff. If you've ever, you know, rubbed your hand over the top of a microphone, you know, with full volume, that's kind of what it sounded like, just, you know. So I'm in the door frame there trying to protect myself as best I can. Something hit me in the back so hard that I spun all the way around 360 degrees and landed on my face. The roof was gone. I didn't know it at the time, but I assumed the walls were gone. I mean, there was wind and hail everywhere. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and I started calling 911, like as if firefighters would just show up and be like, "Go away, tornado," and everything, you know, everything would be fine. But that's where my head was at. I couldn't get through. There's no service. And so I started calling my fiance at the time, my wife now, to tell her I was going to die and I loved her. That was where my head was at that moment. That didn't work either. So I just had to lay there and wait.
Wow. Do you have any idea like how much time passed during that moment?
You know, I get asked this a lot, and it felt like, I mean, it felt like 30 minutes, you know, but it wasn't. I mean, it was, you know, 90 seconds, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. It wasn't very long, but it felt like an eternity just laying there waiting for it to be over. And then it stopped. And like in my head, you know, you hear about the eye of the storm and all that, right? And I thought, oh no, I'm in the middle. This is gonna happen again. I'm gonna get a second run at this. So I didn't get up at first. And so I just laid there getting, you know, hit by hail and all kinds of stuff falling. And then I heard people screaming, and for some reason that was my signal that it was okay to get up. That's when I finally stood up. And when I did, you could, you know, I didn't know at the time it was an F5, right, an EF5, but you could tell it was the worst thing that you've ever seen. Yeah, I mean, so I was at 19th and Rangeline, so when I stood up, I could see Home Depot, and you've seen the photos of what that looked like. I could see Academy Sports, and you've seen the photos of what that looked like. I could see Walmart 4 blocks away that would normally be blocked by other buildings. I could see the Walmart and the shape it was in. We were kind of on the other side of a hill, so once I got up a hill a little bit, I could see St. John's on fire across town. And so the scale of the devastation was immediately obvious once I stood up. And that was my realization that this is nothing like anything we've ever, I mean here anyway, nothing like we've ever seen before.
Wow. So you are kind of assessing the situation, probably assessing your own,
Yeah.
safety and
Yeah, right.
What do you do after that point?
So my initial instinct was to help people, but to be honest with you, in those first few seconds, there was nobody to be helped. I mean, it was pure panic. This isn't a pedestrian corridor, right? So it's not like there was people everywhere, but the people who were there were all panicked, including me, all panicked. So, once I kind of realized I was going to be of no use here, I started trying to save myself. So I ran out in the street and flagged down the first car I saw. It was a family from California. They were here for a graduation, not Joplin's graduation, interestingly, but another graduation. They were headed south down Range Line, and when they pulled up, I could hear the wife say, "No, leave him." And I was like, "Please don't leave me," And I heard the husband say, "No, look at him, he's bleeding. We have to help him." So they stopped and they let me in the back seat. And I didn't get their names or anything. I wish I had, but I remember sitting in their back seat with. They had 2 little girls who were terrified, as you can imagine. And now there's this bloody, cut up, wet man sitting in their back seat, and I just found myself like apologizing to them, like I'm so sorry. I'm hurt, but I'm not hurt. I'm okay. You don't need to be scared. Like, we're safe now, to these little girls. Meanwhile, the couple in the front, like, they're from California. They've never seen any of this. So they're like trying to drive over power lines like don't know how to use defrost. So they're using a t-shirt to like wipe down the windshield. And so like I'm having to coach them, like, this is, storm driving. Don't go over power lines, this, that, and the other. And they took me to a Motel 6 where I waited for my wife to come pick me up.
So how long were you at Motel 6 before you decided you needed to go in for medical attention?
Well, so I was at the Motel 6 for, I don't know, a couple of hours before my wife was able to get to me and pick me up. They had to go all the way around, between the damage and emergency vehicles coming into town, they had to go all the way around town to get to me, so it took a while. And then we went home for several hours. Like I said, when I got up, I could see how bad it was. And I knew that the devastation wouldn't just be buildings. I had worked at KSN for several years right before this. We'd covered serious tornadoes, including in Seneca just a couple of years prior. And I was there when we covered some of I don't think I was working there yet, actually, but I remember like the Greensburg coverage from Kansas. And I remember when that sort of devastation comes through, the human toll is beyond, the scope of what you can imagine in terms of versus buildings. And what I saw was buildings. Mm-hmm. So I knew that there would be humans in much worse position than those buildings. So my wife wanted to go immediately. I said, no, we will wait. I mean, I was injured. I had cuts pretty much everywhere. I had skin exposed. I had a large hematoma on the back of my head, concussion. I had glass embedded in my skin from, head to neck, basically. I had asphalt embedded in my ears. I had damage to my teeth from stuff hitting me in the face during the storm. I had insulation like packed in my ears, which may be why I didn't hear it as well as some other people. So, we cleaned that up as best we could, and then we came to the triage center here at the Leon building. It wasn't called the Leon building at the time. They were still looking for a name, but at the Leon building, and got care there about 6 o'clock in the morning. So about 12 hours before I sought care.
How did you find out that that was even an option to come here?
Social media.
Okay.
Yes, I mean, social media was not like it is now, right? But like that, you got a word out quickly that way. And so a lot of, after the tornado, it wasn't just Southern. Everybody was really great about spreading messages, checking in, who's missing, who's safe, all that. I mean, I was on the initial missing list that was published. I was on it on Facebook, put out by JPD.
Wow.
So obviously I wasn't missing, but they didn't know. And the reason they didn't know was because I couldn't check in. I didn't have a phone. I didn't have, any of that, because I'd been directly in the storm. So, Facebook was how I found out. My wife, she had been kind of doom scrolling through all this, to be honest with you, and had seen it. And it was the closest one to us, to be honest with you. And of course, I was most comfortable here. I didn't want to go to Memorial Hall or one of the, well, I guess I shouldn't say one of, Freeman was the only hospital left at that point, but didn't want to go to the actual hospital. So we came here. We walked in the door at maybe 6:30 in the morning and didn't leave for a few hours, but they got me all taken care of.
Can you describe what that looked like when you first stepped into the space?
A little bit of chaos. The building, to be honest with you, I don't think the building was completely finished yet. I mean, I think there were still some finishing touches to be put on, if I remember right. But so it was kind of a blank canvas in some ways. And I think that may have contributed to how quickly they were able to get it going. They were able to get medical staff in there very quickly, medical equipment in there very quickly, because there was already some coming in, right? They were finishing up the building. When we walked in the door, we checked in. I was taken straight to a shared room upstairs. My wife, she wasn't my wife at the time, right? So the nurse who was taking care of me initially was like, "You're not family, you're gonna have to leave." And my wife was like, "That is not gonna happen. You better figure it out, because I am not leaving." That was completely off the topic, but like, we had been engaged for a few months at that point, and that was one of the things where I went, okay, this is going to work,
Yeah.
So that was cool. But honestly, they picked the rest of the glass out of me. They picked the rest of the asphalt out of me. That was not comfortable. And then they just monitored me for a couple of hours for the concussion. They said the hematoma probably had needed stitches, but because I had been cleaned up a little bit at the Motel 6 by some bystanders, that probably it would be okay. So we left it, and they sent me home in bandages and, with enough products to take care of myself for a few days. So great experience. I mean, all things considered, the circumstances weren't great, but very well taken care of. I had no complaints at all. Felt right at home.
Which it is part of it was your home and your
Yeah.
educational home at the time.
Yeah, I mean, I spent more time here than I did at my house sometimes. I mean, especially, those long Wednesday nights putting the chart print edition together back then, right? Like, there were days I would be here 12, 14, 16 hours on campus, So, yeah, it was home. And, in a lot of ways, my actual home wasn't affected, so I was lucky in that way. And my home away from home wasn't really affected, right? But I was lucky enough to be able to come to your point, my educational home, and get that care. So yeah, it was I'm not a person who would normally go seek medical care, so it definitely was easier to come here than it would have been to go somewhere else. Yeah.
Was the triage center still pretty full at that time, or had a lot of individuals been
It
able to-
wasn't. I mean, it wasn't. I don't know that full is the way I would. It was certainly busy, but I don't know if full is the way I would characterize it. I mean, like I said, when I walked in with relatively minor injuries, right, they took me straight back. So it couldn't have been full. But yeah, there was still a lot of activity at that time. Yeah, but I would imagine, I wasn't here when it first opened, but I would imagine it had slowed down some since the initial rush.
Let's talk now about your experience as now, at that time, just a new editor for the chart, and your interest at the time was more in sports coverage.
Yeah.
But as a result of the tornado, a lot of the stories were all focused on that. How did that kind of change your storytelling and then even some of your career direction?
Yeah, so I had been writing sports and columns prior to this. I had not been named the editor on May 22nd. I wasn't named the editor until August.
Okay.
So I spent the summer preparing for sports stories. Sports overall weren't really affected by this. Most things were out of season by then, like a couple of fields damaged, but like sports overall were kind of unscathed. But athletes weren't, coaches weren't. So those were the stories I started putting together, trying to figure out a list of, okay, who was affected, who's maybe not here anymore because of that tornado, and I don't mean killed, I mean just had to move to a different school or something, or went home or whatever, and started putting some of those ideas on paper, just having a list of what I can do when I get back to school. When I came back, we didn't have an editor, and the circumstances of the newspaper were that we didn't have a lot of experienced staff. We didn't have an experienced advisor, and so we were kind of all in this together, you know. And I thought, okay, I can lead, so I'll do that. And so I threw my hat in the ring, and I was named the editor. And kind of overnight, your responsibilities change, right? I mean, I had gone from covering cross country to now the very first news story I'm covering for the chart is a 9/11 remembrance event where they bring a flag from ground zero, everybody puts their own personal stitch in it, it goes to another location, in which they had incorporated tornado recovery and remembrance in the same event. And so, I mean, almost overnight, my responsibilities changed, which meant my perspective had to change. You know, it's being a sports guy, at least in college, when you're covering cross country with the great Tom Rutledge, you know, you got it pretty easy, you know what I mean? And it was not easy sometimes to cover those remembrance events and memorial walks and, you know, all the other things that happened in the year after the tornado.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it goes from having a pretty good time covering the Southern Stampede to having a less good time, you know, in some of those events. And one of the things that I took from the tornado, but also took from my education here is to keep it together in those moments. You know, don't panic, don't be upset. Like, these people are already upset. Just show them grace, you know. And that was a thing that, you know, I may not have had without my own experience on May 22nd, showing me that I can keep my cool under pressure, under the highest pressure, right? So there's no reason I can't keep my cool with these folks.
So using those lessons learned shortly after the tornado and how you approached journalism, or how you maybe changed your approach to journalism at the time, how has that changed what career you thought you were going into, or how has that driven you in the career you're now into?
So that's really where it started, right? Was I was named the editor and had to start covering news stories. I had to grow up a little bit, you know what I mean? Yeah. And it really just kind of snowballed from there. You know, I was kind of a goof in college. You know, I mean, I still am, but like, you know, I was a goof. You know, nobody took me seriously, and rightfully so. You know, but I had to grow up a little bit, and when I did, I realized, hey, I'm not just a goof. You know, I can do this. I belong here. And so I started covering some of those events, and so the very first one I mentioned, the flag event, the 9/11 flag event, that story won an award my first year. That was the first news story I ever wrote, and it won a state award that year, which is like, it was like a third place. You know, I would not hang that on my wall, you know what I mean? But it meant a lot to me because it meant I could hang. So I spent that year covering news, and you know, I realized that my future, you know, if I really wanted a job and I really wanted to get serious and you know, I don't want to say make money because it's the newspaper business, right? You know, but have a long career and be, you know, stable in a business that's very unstable. News was going to be my path, and so I reported for a year, and then I went back to sports my last semester just so I could have a little break. Yeah. And then when I got hired by the Joplin Globe, it was in design, and I was doing news most of the time. I wasn't always doing sports, and you know, it was an adjustment to my perspective and to my, you know, kind of my worldview, to be honest with you, because I kind of saw a lot of things through the context of sports and changing, you know, moving over to news, covering different things, being exposed to more things, really kind of opened me up to a lot. And like I said, having that and then the combined experience of like, keep it together, you know, don't panic, let's just go and get stuff done, you know, trudge through, get our work done. Those things combined, I think, have really taken me further than anything else has that I've gotten anywhere else.
Through that writing process, did that help you like kind of process some of the emotions of your experience, or how did that help you?
Yeah, you know, it wasn't the reporting so much. It wasn't the actual writing. It was being around some of these people and hearing their stories. It's funny about the tornado. Like, my experience has been that everybody in Joplin has a tornado story, and yet somehow I always felt very alone in mind. And maybe that's because I was when it happened, right? But like, I just felt very alone with my experience. And so getting back out there with some of those people and hearing their stories, and some of them better than mine, some of them worse than mine, but just hearing their stories and not feeling alone anymore. I think that did a lot for me as a person, but as a reporter and then later as an editor, I think I wasn't alone in my story, but I also wasn't alone in feeling alone, And I think that that has really helped me be more open to the kinds of stories that we tell, and the impacts that they can have, big and small. Not everything has to be a 120-inch New York Times Pulitzer winner. You can make an impact in 10, 12 inches. And that was what I learned most, covering tornado stories as a tornado survivor.
Yeah. Well, having that unique perspective and being able to connect with those other survivors or others who experienced maybe partially different experiences, but still the same event, I think probably you bring a lot to those stories.
I think sometimes it helps people, trust in those situations. He knows what I've been through. So I got some stories that others maybe didn't, and I was told some tales that maybe others wouldn't be told. And that has been the case, not just with tornado stories. I mean, that's been the case with other things in my career. I mean, you have to, if you want to build a career as a successful journalist, you have to be trustworthy. And I don't just mean in shared experience. I mean in terms of ethics. I mean in terms of, how you carry yourself in your day-to-day. And certainly I have made a fool of myself from time to time, but it's important that people know that, listen, I may not know exactly what you experienced, but I have sympathy, I have empathy, and I can feel a little bit of what you're feeling. If you let me tell your story, others can feel what you're feeling too. And that was, sharing my story with people helped me deal with it. Eventually the panic attacks stop, eventually the nightmares stop, just from talking about it, getting it out. And so it was therapeutic, in a way, right? But, I think the biggest thing for me was just learning to establish the relationship that it takes to tell a story and to bring that story to the world.
That's great. Now that you're looking at 15 years later, reflecting back on some of those memories or experiences, can you share just some thoughts on how you reflect on that even now?
Yeah, so the biggest thing now, 15 years later, is I take weather much more seriously now than I did in the past. I mean, like I said, I think you ask just about anybody in Joplin, and there's kind of a before tornado and an after tornado, right? And most will tell you, if you go back to 2009, you go back to 2010, if you'd have turned the tornado sirens on, I would have probably gone outside to watch rather than hide,
Yeah.
And that's just kind of who I've always been. And then I experienced what I experienced, and that is not who I am anymore. So today, looking back on it, the truth is I try to think about it as little as possible. And then of course, May 22nd rolls around and you have to a little bit. The only thing that I think about on a day-to-day basis as it relates to the tornado is, what is our weather like today? And it used to be, is it sunny? Can I wear shorts today? It is not anymore. I am checking the National Weather Service Storm Prediction Center every single day. I know the forecast for everywhere between here and St. Louis every single day, and will for the rest of my life. I mean, that's the lasting effect for me 15 years later.
Nathan, thank you so much for taking your time to share an incredible story, a challenging memory, no doubt, but also how it has shaped your life personally and your career. And so thank you so much for your time sharing that with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.